Hi, everybody. Welcome to this webinar on the service desk and the next normal. We have a very special person presenting us today, Vawns Murphy. She's here. Please join me in welcoming her. And of course, good morning or afternoon or evening, depending on where you're joining us from today. My name is Leanne Gordon, and I'm with the Manage Engine team. Thank you again for joining us, and hope you're all keeping well and keeping safe. We're very excited to have you all here, and also Vawns, who will be speaking to us today on the services and the next normal on how to effectively deliver services in hybrid work models. With that, let me give you a short introduction about our company, Manage Engine, and what we are all about and what we do. Manage Engine is the enterprise IT management division of Zoho Corporation. Our products are in the spectrum of real-time IT management tools, ranging from Active Directory management tools, monitoring, network and application monitoring, IT service management, enterprise password management, business intelligence software, and so on. We also have partners across the globe, 200 plus of them, who help organizations around the world tightly align their businesses and IT. And if you're interested in knowing more about Manage Engine, please visit manageengine.com. I'd also like to introduce you all to our IT service management solution, which is Manage Engine's flagship product, Service Desk Plus. Service Desk Plus is available as both on-premises and cloud versions. It's a full-stack ITSM suite with all ITSM best practices, including IT incident management, problems, changes, IT asset management, service catalog, CMDB, built-in reporting and analytics, as well as native and third-party integrations. So to know more about this, please do check out servicedeskplus.com. So that's about us. And without any further ado, let me all introduce you to Vawns, who will be our speaker for the day. Before I transfer the session over to Vawns, let me quickly give you all an introduction about Vawns. Vawns Murphy is lead IT partner for service delivery at Silver Homes, and she's an experienced and award-winning service management professional with the red badge for ITIL V2, which is the manager title, and a purple badge, which is the expert title for ITIL V3. She also holds qualifications including COVID, Prince2, Microsoft. She has a BSc in Science and Technology and is a long history as a service management architect, consultant, and evangelist. She's also a member of the ITSMF UK Transition Management Working Party and SIG, member of the ITSMF Ireland Management Committee, author of ITSMF UK Collateral on Service Transition, Software Asset Management, and Problem Management. She's the reviewer for Service Transition, ITIL 3 2011 publication, and a winner of the ITSMF UK 2017 Thought Leadership Award. And in addition to all of these, she's also a founding member and an in-house blogger for the ITSM.tools website. Vawns, we're so excited to hear from you today. So let me not take any more of your time. The stage is all yours.
Thanks, Lee, and I'm thrilled to be here. Right, let me just transfer over and open up my slides. So folks, just give me one moment. Brilliant.
Yes.
Hi all, welcome and thanks so much for joining us and for also bearing with me. So today's session, we're going to talk about ITSM and the new normal, the next normal. So Lee's given me an introduction. So I've worked in IT forever. I'm Irish. I've got 3 kids. I live in the UK. And working in IT forever, like I've worked for all sorts of companies. I've worked for consultancies, I've worked for local governments, I've worked for finance, petrochemicals, pharmaceuticals, non-profit. I've seen all sorts of things during that time. I've seen major incidents and service continuity events triggered from everything from acts of terrorism, natural disasters, to squirrels. But I think never kind of in all my planning, and I've done a lot of planning for kind of worst case scenarios, I never thought that we'd experience something like COVID. Not the human toll, not the duration, not the sheer fear of it all. So really this session is going to look at how we continue to deliver IT services in the new normal as the world, starts to move past COVID and to new ways of working. So how service delivery has changed. We've all had to shift to remote working, and we've all had to cope with that. There's definitely been more automation. We've definitely had to shift to automation to kind of take some of the load. We found out what was really important. Okay, I think a lot of us, we all have service catalogs, we all have DR or business continuity plans where we have like our vital kind of or critical business functions listed. But COVID was something that hit the reset button on all of that, and it made us really evaluate what was important, particularly when hard decisions had to be made or we had to figure out what to prioritize when we had maybe less people or less resources available. A lot of us struggled more than we'd like to admit. Okay, folks felt isolated, people were furloughed, people were ill, people were scared. And I think COVID's been like a really tough year for lots of us, but 2020 and beyond. So in this presentation or in this session, we're going to talk about how to deliver efficient and effective and safe IT services in this next normal. We're going to look at people, process, and tech. But first of all, we're going to talk about the people issues because our people are everything. And in that, we're going to talk about customer experience. We're going to talk about remote support skills because it is a completely different way of providing support. If you're used to providing support in person, on site, and then you suddenly have to shift to doing it remotely, that can be a steep learning curve. We're going to talk about communication and why 2020 and beyond has really kind of flagged how important great communication skills are, the importance of empathy, how we can put ourselves in someone else's shoes and like understand what they might be experiencing or feeling. And we're also going to talk about mental health because I think that one of the things with the COVID tragedy, we've all watched in mounting horror at the death toll and people being displaced, lockdowns, people losing their jobs. What I don't think we've quite understood yet, and we won't for a while, I don't think, is the impact that COVID has had on folks' mental health. So we're going to talk about mental health and how to safeguard it and how to be proactive and how to make things better for the folks around us. Okay, so let's talk about customer experience or CX. So it's changed. Okay. CX in 2021, it's a very different prospect than to those halcyon days pre-COVID. Okay, pre-COVID, CX was everything, and rightly so. We used it to drive everything from building and maintaining great relationships with the business to kind of developing and kind of innovating our ways of working. And the buzzwords could have been surprise, delight, going the extra mile. And then COVID came and it all changed. We shifted from, this better, faster, stronger model to actually, what do we need? How do we keep the lights on when maybe we've got folks that are sick and are self-isolating, we've got supply chain issues, we've got people maybe missing equipment or using less than ideal equipment, we've got folks, maybe being used to working in the office to suddenly having to work from home. So the focus, I think, in 2020 and beyond for CX was about stability, it was about reliability. And I'd like to think that we're past the worst of COVID, but at the time of like pulling these slides together and practicing them at the weekends, New Zealand, who'd been COVID free for, I think, most of last year, had entered a lockdown because of a single case. The UK, I think the other day, reported their highest number of COVID deaths since March. But then you look at kind of other countries that are lifting restrictions, like Ireland are now vaccinating kind of 14 and 15-year-olds. I think there's hope. There's definitely hope. And things are going to be brighter. They're going to be better. But I think we need to be mindful that it's not going to be anywhere approximating normal for a little while. I think if you're in an organisation that's global, has offices all over the world, there will be differences by region, and we just need to be able to adapt and to flex to that. We need to be mindful of tone. So maybe instead of surprise, delight, excitement, it's stability, it's reliability, it's safety. We're here. We're going to get to the bottom of your issue. One way of doing this, I think, is to keep that focus on the important things, is to focus on outcomes. So build our kind of responses to focus on outcomes. So what does the customer actually want? Well, they want their issue to be fixed. They want it to be fixed as quickly as possible, as safely as possible. If we can't fix it straight away, then we need a workaround. And that workaround might not be perfect, okay? We might need to get flexible. So instead of having a corporate laptop, they might need to use their own laptop temporarily. And this is where cloud-based services like 365 or Google Suite come in. Okay, it's all about focusing on the customer and the individual and being driven by what they want. There's absolutely time for surprise and delight, but while we're getting back to normal, something approximating normal, while we're getting the show on the road, I think stability, safety, being reliable, they're going to be the big watchwords for 2020, 2021 and beyond. Okay. So next we're going to talk about remote support. And like I said before, it's a completely different way of delivering support. Pre-COVID, people could we're used to working, company and rules permitting, wherever we want. People could work at the office, they could work from home, they could work in Starbucks. Okay. And COVID and the associated lockdowns, that changed that overnight. So suddenly we didn't have a choice anymore. That choice was taken from us. So instead of working wherever we wanted to, we were working from home. Some of us were crammed in like a couple of rooms with our 3 kids trying to homeschool as well as trying to work. So that wasn't an ideal situation. And with that, we had to change the way we delivered support. And when you deliver support remotely rather than in person, you use a completely different set of skills. And I think the first thing to say is be prepared to talk more. So when I was fixing something for someone on site, or one of my team was, rather than have them sat there watching us do it, like if it was something like very technical. I mean, obviously it's fascinating to us, but I appreciate that IT is not going to be fascinating to everyone, particularly not like the end user. So you had the option to say, look, do you want to grab a coffee? This is going to be 5 minutes. Do you want to grab a walk or grab some lunch, just so you're not kind of sat there watching us do our thing? And that's not an option when you're providing remote support. You might need them to do something. You might need them to accept a session or restart the device or enter their credentials. And if you don't talk, if you're silent, that's going to get really awkward really quickly. So just be prepared to talk more and to engage with the person at the other end of the phone. While we're talking more, we also need to be listening more to make sure that we don't miss anything. And a way of doing that is to use active listening. By active listening, I mean kind of reflecting back what the person's just said in the form of a question, just to make absolutely sure that you've understood what the issue is, because I think we're all feeling a little bit under pressure. I think everyone's felt the effects of the last year. You're probably struggling with lots of things, trying to juggle work and home life, trying to juggle different ways of working. Probably got like more tickets than normal. I know that I saw, like, in some stages, like our ticket volumes triple or even quadruple at the height of things. So it's easy to miss things. So by using active listening, so by saying, okay, so you're saying that Excel isn't working or it's glitching when you run that particular macro, you're really understanding what the issue is. You're also making that person feel heard. Okay. And sometimes, the small things really are the big things. You know, like Word might be not cooperating because, you're offline and it can't pull the licensing server. Excel might not be glitching, not because the whole spreadsheet's corrupt, because there's like a rogue full stop or a space in a formula. I don't know about you, but they can be tricky to see. So just by taking that extra time to reflect back on the user, A, you make sure you get all the facts, B, you make them, feel heard. What's not to love? Okay. Quiet time. So make sure that you're using quiet time effectively. And what do I mean by quiet time? So on any kind of support call, there'll always be some downtime. Either you're rebooting the device, you're installing something, you're waiting for something to load or pop up. I mean, take the start of this presentation when the screen sharing functionality just was not cooperating, and we had to do stuff in the background. So instead of going completely silent, because there's nothing more concerning to an end user than being sat in total silence on a support call with the tech. Okay, just take a second to kind of recap what you're doing, or to maybe sanity check their asset information to make sure that's correct, or even just ask them if there's anything else they need tech-wise. Ask them if they're okay or how their day's going, not because some manual says so or not because ITIL says you have to, but because it's a nice thing to do. It's a human thing to do. I think the one thing that COVID has taught us is that, our people are everything. Like, you can have fantastic processes. You could be compliant to every best practice framework you can think of, from ITIL to ISO 20K to COBIT. You can't be compliant to ITIL. It's a framework, but you could adhere to it. You're compliant to 20K. But you could have fancy equipment. You could have all the gadgets. But if you don't have people, or you have people and they're not happy, then nothing's going to be quite right. Nothing's going to work as it should be. Our people are everything. So we need to remember that. And finally, we need to mind the gap. Okay, there's going to be like a variety of kind of experiences. So some folk love working from home and they love working remotely. They love, engaging with support remotely, and they're fine. But you'll also have folks who, this is all new, either because they're just, they've been out of work, they were made redundant, they're starting a new job, or they're coming back from furlough, or they're coming back from sick leave. And not only are they having to get used to kind of being back in a working environment, they're having to get used to working in a different way with maybe different equipment and being kind of supported differently. So just acknowledge that, there's going to be a gap, and just make sure that you flex, you tweak your approach accordingly. Okay. So next up, we're going to talk about communication. So now more than ever, it's really important to practice good communication because it builds relationship and trust. Okay, and a really important aspect of communication is being proactive. And I'm going to give you some examples. Okay, so when you're an end user, okay, you don't call the service desk for the crack or for fun. You call it because if something's gone wrong, and that can be stressful kind of at the best of times. And I think we can all agree this is not the best of times. So one thing that I advise is just the importance of being proactive. And you can do this in lots of different ways. You can either build kind of prompts into your processes, or you can get the tool to do some of the heavy lifting. So 2 quick wins. They sound basic, but you'd be amazed at how many people forget to implement these or just haven't got around to doing it. One, have your tool fire an email. So if someone logs an incident or a service request, just have the tool fire an email. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It can just say something like, "Hi, Bob, Lucy, thanks for contacting us. We've got your ticket. We're going to start working on it. Your reference number is what the reference number is." And that's really important in building trust, because sometimes for an end user, engaging with IT can be scary. Like, we want to know what's happened to our ticket, because if you don't get that immediate feedback, you're thinking, did I log it correctly, or has it gone into a black hole? If there's no acknowledgement, they could think, maybe I haven't logged it correctly, so I'm going to log it again and again. And next thing, you've got multiple tickets for the same issue. The next thing is status updates. So build triggers in your tool or in your process so that every time a ticket changes status, so whether it's been looked at, whether you're engaging with the supplier, whether you're waiting on equipment, that person gets a quick email just saying, look, this is the current status of your ticket. Because sometimes if the end user hasn't heard from the service desk for a little while, they chase. And sometimes they might ring again. And if it's a busy time, that then kind of diverts kind of resources away from kind of new faults. Sometimes they'll log an extra ticket. Sometimes they'll email the service desk, which again could generate another ticket. And suddenly, again, you've got multiple tickets for the same issue. So by being proactive, by building great communication into your working practices, you avoid that. Empathy. So the ability to put yourself in someone else's situation. I think in treating everyone with empathy, users and IT colleagues, and recognizing that folks are struggling in their own way, even if they're not saying it, even if they're not outwardly displaying signs that they're struggling. COVID's done a number on us collectively. We just need to be mindful of that everyone's got their own journey, their own struggle. And we're going to switch gears for a second and talk about ITIL. So the new version of ITIL came into practice just over a year ago. We're on ITIL 4. One of my favourite aspects of ITIL 4 is the idea of service empathy. And let me just read it from my notes because I can never ever remember the definition. ITIL 4 defines it as the ability to recognise, understand, predict and project the needs, interests, intentions and experiences of another party in order to establish, maintain, improve the service relationship. Okay, trying saying that 5 times fast. Okay, put simply, people are the heart of your service desk. Okay, gone are the days where, IT would be sat in a basement asking if before anything else you'd switch your laptop off and on again. For those of you who've seen the IT Crowd, there was like a whole TV series based on that very kind of concept. Okay, like when we're hiring people, I think have the knowledge that you can always teach technical skills, but what you can't necessarily teach easily is people skills. So making sure that you make your colleagues, your customers, it's that feeling of looked after. So, an example could be knowing the difference between letting the customer vent for a few minutes versus gently kind of just tweaking the conversation back or guiding the conversation back to the issue at hand. That can make a massive difference between a negative experience an outcome on a great one. So just know that folks are struggling and just be mindful and try to kind of build allowances. So we're going to talk about mental health. So the impact on COVID on wellbeing has been absolutely catastrophic. I think we can all agree on that. I know that in time there'll be all sorts of research and studies, but COVID, as well as the human kind of like the deaths and the long kind of term health implications, there's also been a really, really negative impact on mental health. ITSM Tools conducted a survey at the end of 2020, reported that 86% 86% of respondents felt that working in IT was going to get harder over the next 3 years. That's a massive figure, 86%. Okay, so not only do we have to deal with COVID, but we've got to deal with the fallout. And, we're not going to go back to normal overnight. Like, it's going to take time. And we're going to have to figure out how to work, in that kind of really challenging environment. So it's really, really important to have strategies in place to support your people. And one way of doing this is to incorporate like a mental health framework into your working practices. And okay, it's all very well and good to say, right, we've got a mental health framework, but what does that actually look like? Well, first of all, having an actual policy in place for colleague kind of well-being and mental health, to make sure that everyone's treated kind of consistently and fairly. Building in kind of support strategies day to day. So maybe having a buddy system so that, everyone knows that they've got someone they can vent to, particularly at the end of a difficult day where it feels like everything's been going wrong. Or having wellbeing champions, people that are aware of kind of like resources and like being able to signpost people. Every country, there's resources out there. Like Ireland has the Aware website, the UK has the Mind website, the NHS website. There's loads of information out there. But what I'd say is pull it all together in one central place and make it easy to find. Because if you're struggling with your mental health, if you're struggling with depression, the last thing you're going to want to have to do is go on a Google search or go on this mission to find resources. Just have it all in one place where it's easy to access. Another thing, if you've got an employee assistance program, fantastic. But again, have the kind of employee kind of information easy to find, because again, if you're feeling down and everything feels like a struggle, you don't want to make the process of getting help, harder. You want to make it as easy as possible. And be part of the conversation and make it easy for people to ask for help. So from personal experience, I view myself as someone that's fairly resilient. I just crack on and I roll with things. And being a single parent in COVID didn't break me. Lockdown didn't break me. Having to isolate or shield or cocoon didn't break me. I've got a particular type of asthma that my GP said just wouldn't play nicely with COVID. So I had to shield or cocoon, depending on the terminology you're using. That didn't break me. But something did break me, and I'll tell you the story because it's funny now. We'd been over a year into COVID, and we had a group of folks, and they had tablets, and they realised that we wanted to be able to use them kind of out and about, and they didn't have slots for SIM cards. And there are so many fixes for that. You can tether, you can join guest Wi-Fi, you can buy dongles. And I suggested all of that. And instead of I got off the phone, and instead of updating the ticket and being, okay, this is completely fine, I rang one of my best friends at work and I cried for 10 minutes about these poor people and their tablets. And I didn't just get a bit tearful, I full on sobbed for 10 minutes about these poor people and the tablets. And, what if they don't know how to tether? Or what if what if we can't get them dongles? Or what if they don't know how to join kind of Wi-Fi? And there was workarounds to all of those things. But in that moment, I realized that, I was struggling. And I think it's really important that we change the language, because when I was struggling, I didn't know how to ask for help. So maybe in your kind of framework or in your guidelines, give people examples, because I didn't have the words. And I know that sounds funny because, I blog, I present, I talk at industry events, like words, it's kind of my thing. And I couldn't have I didn't have the words to try and explain kind of how I was feeling. I just didn't know them. So maybe give people examples, like I'm really struggling today. I'm feeling really down. I'm feeling so down that it's really, really scaring me, and I need some help. by talking about it, it takes the stigma away from it. It makes it less scary, and it makes it easier for people to get help. Our people are our everything, and so that's why we need to look after ourselves and each other to make sure that we all get through this. Okay, so we've talked about people. Now we're going to talk about technology. So what about technology? Well, the importance of being present. So we're going to look at ways in which we can seem to be omnipresent. Frequent flyers. So the most common kind of pain points that I've bumped into, and what we did to fix them. And we're going to talk about hybrid environments, some of the challenges that they present. Just doing a quick check on time to make sure that I'm still okay. I am. Fabulous. So the importance of being present. I think during COVID, I think maybe before COVID, I think we were very kind of focused on using technology. And I think, using apps, using portals, and that's fantastic. But I think what COVID has taught us is what's really important is giving people options. So some people, whatever happens, they'll want to pick up the phone. I think that's particularly important in a COVID environment. I mean, that person, if they've been isolating, they might not have spoken to anyone that day. So, yeah, if they want to log a call over the phone, then absolutely, let's offer that. Again, we can use tech to do some of the heavy lifting. We can use IVRs, we can use routing, we can use particular keywords to route certain calls to certain techs. But absolutely, let's have a phone channel. Web chat, that can be a really great way to speed things up, to give flexibility. Particularly if you use AI, you can use kind of predefined kind of responses to key things like password reset, account unlocked, new equipment. You can just point them to the various kind of self-help route. So self-service, and portals and apps. So folks being able to log their own incidents, service requests, also get updates. I think a really good thing about portals and apps is it gives people kind of flexibility so they can multitask. So if they're on a call, they can use their phone to log a quick ticket or request, or just see where the approval status of the request, if it's, for example, new equipment, without having to actually physically call the service desk. Email. So a really basic way of doing that is just linking your service desk tool to your Outlook or whatever email client you're using. So a person can log a ticket just by emailing the service desk. Social forums, so that people can get peer support. Another way of doing that would be potentially having kind of IT champions in each department. So someone who has like a wealth of knowledge of kind of their in-house applications, because I think that for in-house applications, like for your own bespoke applications, yes, from an IT expert, we're experts. We're experts in installing the service. We're experts in maintaining it, making sure that it's updated, making sure that it's patched. We're experts in, bringing it back up if it's fallen over. But actually, the day-to-day experts are the people that use it every day, the people that use it like day in, day out. So get them engaged. Finally, walk-ups. Now, I think me, like a lot of people pre-COVID, spent a lot of my time trying to gently encourage folks to, rather than just wandering up to the service desk to have a chat, to use self-service, to use phone, to use chat, to use all of those methods. But I think, again, it's about having that human response and needing that human response. And I think Apple have, I know everyone uses this example, but Apple have really changed the game for walk-ups when they have their Genius bars. It makes that person feel special. It makes them feel heard. And by having by blocking out, by having kind of in-person visits for the complicated stuff or the bulk stuff and doing it in a socially distanced and safe way, again, that's a great way to build kind of relationships and improve engagement. So basically, to be, you might not be available 24/7. You might only be available kind of 8 to 5 or 8 to 6. But by having options, people can at least log their faults, get updates, or maybe do things like reset their password out of hours. It's about giving people options and making them feel empowered. Frequent flyers. So this will vary from company to company, but these are the things that we bumped into. So password resets, all the password resets. So people coming back from furlough or from sick leave, and suddenly we had all these password resets. So what we did was we pushed self-service so that people could go to a web page, reset their own password, which freed up so much volume in terms of service desk tickets. Security concerns. So making sure, I don't think anyone thought or made kind of updating the kind of IT policy for working from home in the height of a pandemic. I don't think that was a priority for anyone, but it should be a priority now as this becomes a new norm. So working from home safely, logging out, using multi-factor authentication, how to respond appropriately to phishing emails. The bad stuff, it hasn't gone away. There are still people out there. There's still people sending phishing emails or developing viruses or malware. So just making sure your IT policy kind of reflects security concerns in a working from home environment. Equipment and cabling. Okay. Having the knowledge that most people probably grabbed whatever equipment they could as lockdown became imminent, and it's really easy to displace cables. So maybe have a sweep of the office before folks start returning to work, so that we know that there's nothing missing, or if there's stuff missing that we can get it ordered. We can check cabling so that the printers work, so that the network cables work. And joiners and leavers. So we'll probably have to evaluate how we look after joiners, movers and leavers. Whereas before, we may have met them on their first day, got them logged on, handed over their equipment, did a quick tech check. We've now got to consider social distancing and like individual preferences. So it could be that we have to do an IT induction remotely. It could be that instead of delivering equipment to, a person's home, we have to deliver it to a safe place or a smart locker or to the office. What I'd say is just build in extra time, because, there could be a delay on equipment. They could go to the wrong place to collect their stuff. Something could go wrong with their induction. What I found really useful is having a welcome letter, which is something that we give kind of all new joiners to the company. And it's a welcome to the company. Here are kind of the cliff notes that you'll need to know for joining the company. So here are your login credentials. Here's where to go if you're if you get stuck or you get locked out of your account. Here's where you go to log a ticket. Here's the company font, here's the company email template, here's how to get in touch with us. Just all the basics in one page. Just have a plan for kind of joiners and leavers in this next normal. Just be mindful and just add some extra time, because things will take longer. It's just the nature of it. Hybrid environments. So what do they look like? So there was a study done by the Boston group late last year, and it found that over 80% of respondents wanted like a hybrid environment going forwards. So a lot of folks didn't want to be in the office 100% of the time. They didn't want to work from home 100% of the time. They wanted a blend of both. And that's because I think working from home is fantastic if you're doing admin tasks or you're dealing with really kind of detail orientated tasks where you need a lot of concentration, you need a lot of quiet time so you're not being interrupted. But there's nothing like being in the office when you want to collaborate, when you want to engage with customers, when you want to bounce ideas of people. Like, I know for me, I'm an absolute massive extrovert, and I missed seeing actual people, being able to engage with them, be able to share ideas, be able to have a laugh. So, there are going to be folks that want to work from home. There are going to be folks that want to work from the office. There are going to be folks that want a blend of both. So that's what it's going to look like. I think the important thing is ask people what they want, because their equipment requirements will be different. Like if someone's working in the office, they might need a desktop. If they're working from home, they might need a laptop, or they might just need a tablet or a phone. And again, a really good way of doing this is having service packages. So having service packages for home working, for office working, for hybrid working. So you've written down the equipment for each model and you've built it into your support system so that, people don't have to think or second guess. It's okay, this is, as a home worker, your core offering, and then being able to tweak as appropriate. So plan for flexibility. When I think about hybrid working, I think of that scene in the Avengers in the Endgame when it's after the snap and Black Widow is basically running the Avengers from her office, and she's speaking to Captain Marvel and Rocket in space, and she's talking to Rhodey in the office, and she's talking to other folks, and it's a mixture of people and holograms. And while, we don't all have Tony Stark levels of tech, I wish, we definitely need to revisit our AV equipment and just make sure that it's fit for purpose. Our remote support software. So we've talked about the actual how we support remotely from a people perspective, but getting used to knowing your remote support software. So getting comfy, documenting everything, have lots of training and practice sessions. There is nothing worse, and I tell you this from bitter experience, than using remote support software for the first time, and it's with it like an end user and you've not practiced it first. It's one of those situations where everything feels kind of harder than it should be. So just practice and get comfortable using it. Have a plan for walking users through getting connected, because sometimes, no matter what's you're promised or claimed, there'll be a network issue or there'll be some kind of hiccup and the software just won't cooperate. I don't think there's a service desk in the land that hasn't had some kind of version of the conversation where you're trying to get them to use or launch Quick Assist, which is the inbuilt kind of Microsoft assistant platform, where you're trying to get like an asset tag from like a tag or the number, or even trying to talk an end user through going through a command prompt to getting like the computer name or host name. Believe me, there is nothing more painful than that, because to them it's completely alien, and suddenly they're used to having this lovely kind of Windows interface, and you're asking them to launch command prompt and like physically interact with kind of command line interfaces and type in codes and having to read things out. Like, that's not great from an experience point of view. So make sure that the remote software is easy to launch. Either it launches automatically, or there's maybe a desktop shortcut on everyone's device, or you email someone a link. Just make it easy. Have a plan in place for getting folks connected. Hardware and equipment. So I think we've all seen the impact of interrupted supply chains. So now is the time, if you haven't already, start building kind of meaningful relationships with suppliers, vendors, and partners. Maybe consider having, like ITIL3, I think, called it a definitive hardware store. I think 4 just calls it the hardware store. Just where you have like spare kind of equipment. Give people the option for delivery, because some people will want to collect their equipment from the office. Some will want to deliver it from home. Maybe consider using Amazon type smart lockers as well. It could be a great way of just dropping equipment off at a central point, and then folks having like a password where they can collect their equipment in a socially distanced way, in a safe way, but that's still secure and it's still easy. So we're going to talk about processes and working practices. So I think COVID has forced us to lean into self-service. That's incident management, request management, knowledge management. So it's about knowing what our kind of most frequent flyers are and templating them. So how do we do that? Maybe go back over the past year, look at our 10 most frequent incident types, look at our 10 most frequent kind of service request types, and template them. So all the end user has to do is select the template, based on maybe a keyword, plug in any kind of differences, and then they hit submit. Knowledge management. I think when we had to prioritize, particularly when ticket volumes were increasing and we maybe had folks self-isolating or off ill, we had to rely on knowledge management and self-help. And again, writing knowledge articles for techies, it's a completely different proposition to writing knowledge articles that you're expecting end users to engage with. So make sure that they're fun to read, because nothing is going to turn, an end user off than just a wall of technical jargon. They're just not going to want to engage with that. I wouldn't want to engage with that. So make it interesting, make it easy to read, have lots and lots of pictures so that it's easy to follow. What worked for me? So pre-COVID, actually checking our business critical services were the things that we documented as having kind of business critical services. There's always something that maybe hasn't been flagged or, you haven't thought of. Like for us, it was this very particular printer that printed these barcodes that we needed for payment runs. And it could only be accessed in the office, and it had to have like a fixed IP address. So if we hadn't have done that check, we wouldn't have picked that up. And we wouldn't have been able to kind of source an alternative and set that up and get it working. Gearing up for remote working. So as soon as we started seeing kind of other countries lock down, we made sure that folks could work from home. We had a phone system that didn't play nicely at the time with direct access, which is our VPN solution at the time. So a couple of us locked ourselves in a room for a week or so to get that working remotely. We had folks practice working remotely. So we kind of negotiated with teams and departments. We said, look, we know you don't want to work remotely, but could you just try for an hour? Could you do the last hour of your day working from home, just so that we know that you can? And asking for help, asking people what they needed. So what worked during COVID? Just continual engagement. Okay, that gift of clarity. So instead of having service reviews every month or every quarter, we checked in with frontline delivery teams every day to make sure that they were online, that they were okay, that they had the equipment they needed. And being very, very honest with the business, what we could and what we couldn't support. Some things were going to take longer as we prioritized keeping the lights on. What worked after? Well, we're all getting used to this completely different way of working. So again, asking people what they needed, because there'll be different working requirements, there'll be different equipment requirements. Most people will want kind of cloud-based services rather than having to rely on on-prem services. So it's about asking people what they need and giving them options. Changing the way we do service reviews. Giving people that flexibility, making it more human. Hindsight, things that I wish we'd done. Equipment and the need for a definitive hardware store. I thought we had great relationships with our supplier, and we did. We had multiple suppliers, we had resilience, but when the supply chains collapsed, it became really difficult to get equipment. So a learning point from us is having a very formal hardware store and having slightly more equipment than we did previously. Remote support software, having a plan for when it fails. So maybe having a user guide on the self-help portal. So, okay, things to do when the remote support software fails. These are the things that you might be asked. This is how to get your IP address. This is where your asset tag is. This is how you launch TeamViewer if we can't launch it remotely. And just the potential toll on well-being and people. So we've got best practice in the next normal. Sorry, couldn't speak there for a second. So we're going to talk about ITIL, DevOps, and COVID. So ITIL is obviously the de facto global standard for IT service management, currently on version 4. DevOps, better, faster, stronger, cheaper. Ways of building kind of resiliency and speed and flow into your working practices. You've got COVID, which helps you gain in maturity. So COVID stands for Control of Business and IT Related Technology. It gives you a framework. It goes from 0 to 5. So if you're looking to get better, if you're looking to level up, if you're looking to get to the next stage in your maturity, have a look at COVID. And what I love about COVID is that it gives you kind of a list of criteria that you need to get for each stage. So once you've figured out where you are, you then have a list of things that you can do to get to the next stage, and the next stage, and so on. It's a great way of building maturity and continual improvement into your working practices. So some ideas, XLAs, or experience level agreements. We've all heard of service level agreements, and SLAs are great. They build relationships. They set out the scene. They let everyone know kind of what we're going to support, how we're going to support it, how we're going to engage with you. But XLAs focus on experience. It focuses on how the person actually feels. So, for example, you could ring the service desk and we could fix your issue within the SLA, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we've done a great job. We could have been really grumpy, or your ticket could have been bounced around a lot so you didn't know who was dealing with, or you didn't feel like a sense of ownership. So XLAs will look at things like the overall experience. So, for example, was your issue fixed? Did you feel that, your call was important, that the person at the other end was doing everything they could to help? What was the knowledge levels like across the various teams? Were you confident that we were able to deliver what we were meant to be able to deliver? Okay. What about consistency and experience? So, sometimes it can feel different logging a ticket in person versus on a portal versus over the phone. Were you confident that no matter how you logged your ticket, it was going to be looked at? Change enablement. So with the new version of Vital, we've had some name changes. So the artist formerly known as Change Management became briefly Change Control and then Change Enablement. I think what's really positive about that is that previous versions of Vital didn't really formally recognise the importance of DevOps and flow, and whereas Vital 4 has. And how has it done that? Well, first of all, I think the name Change Enablement, it's a small tweak, but it's an important one because it means that change will be seen as an enabler rather than a blocker for the business. How do we do that? Maybe we remove completely or reduce CAB. So instead of all changes having to go to CAB and being discussed at length, only the really important ones, or the ones that will involve downtime, or the ones that will affect the whole business need to go to CAB. Maybe for everything else, we don't use CAB. We use maybe standard changes as an alternative, which are kind of pre-approved, routine, tried and tested changes. We have delegated authority. The experts on network and voice services are the network teams. Okay, the experts on Windows, Unix, Linux, there are server teams. So by delegating that authority, by trusting our experts to know what they're talking about, it frees up CAB or change management to really focus on the things that could cause pain if they went wrong. There's also stronger links into DevOps, so the concept of kind of failing fast, pull-based ways of working. It's about making change a leaner and more efficient animal to enable it to deliver value more quickly instead of being stuck by blockers and approval points. Business continuity plan. I think all of us are guilty of having this really bloated, detailed continuity plan, maybe having a DR test once a year, and then patting ourselves on the back for a job well done. I think for a lot of us, business continuity or 2020 was just one long exercise in business continuity. It was just one long DR test. So now that we've had this hindsight, now that we know what our pain points were, what our critical services were, what are the things that really mattered? What are the things, if nothing else worked, had to work so that we continue on? Those are the things that we update and we focus on as we rebuild our continuity plans. Increased improvements and marginal gains. So I know a lot of you are thinking, how do I build in continual improvements into our processes after the year we've had? I think the answer is incremental improvements. Just small bursts of improvements. They might seem small at the time, but they'll have a cumulative effect. They'll get bigger and bigger and bigger over time. So one example could be kind of templating all your incidents, templating all your frequent kind of service requests. Okay, it won't change the world overnight, but the more you template, the easier it is, and the easier it is for your end users to engage with the service desk, and the better their experience will be, and the better the relationship will be. So it'll build over time. Another example would be to template change types. So a lot of people don't engage with the change practice because it takes 5-10 minutes to raise a change. I think sometimes we get so excited with our tools that we think, well, we can have all this extra information, so let's ask for it. If you template all the changes, it means that the tech can just select whichever template it is, select what type of change it is, plug in the dates, and it's submitted. They're in the process. And suddenly, instead of having lots of out-of-process changes, you have a change program that's really slick, that's really safe, that's really efficient and safe, because everyone's following the process correctly, because you made it easy. And increasing flow, so using things like Kanban and Lean and Kaizen to kind of, instead of having push or big bang deployments, have lots of small, incremental, continual deployments to avoid bottlenecks and work in progress. So upshot or final thoughts, look after your people. They are everything. Be flexible. Give good CX, and just know that good CX now looks completely different to what we thought good CX looked like in 2018, 2019. I think whatever happens, just keep showing up, keep doing the job, keep trying your best, keep moving forward, because it will be okay. It will be. Thanks so much for listening, and I'm here for any questions. And if you think of something later, my email address and Twitter handle, they're all on the screen, or you can get in touch with me through Lay Your Manage Engine. So I'm going to hand back to Lee.
Thank you so much for that, Vawns, for that very informative and thought-provoking session. We truly enjoyed it. We do have a couple of questions. Would you like me to read them out to you?
I would love that. Thank you.
Okay. So someone said they did not catch on what DHS means.
I'm sorry?
Did not catch on what DHS means.
Apologies. So in ITIL, I think 2 and 3, DHS stood for Definitive Hardware Store. And it's a fancy name for basically an IT cupboard where you have spare equipment. So spare laptops, spare phones, keyboards, mice, all the kind of assets and peripherals that you'd need kind of day to day. I think later versions of ITIL just call it a definitive store or a hardware store, but it's literally just having a really well-stocked place where people can go for spare equipment. And it's the equipment that they'd use day to day. So it's things like laptops, phones, headsets, keyboards, mice. Apologies for descending into jargon there.
Okay, there's another question. Could you please throw some light on the information security and data security challenges in the new normal?
Well, absolutely. Before, when people were working in the office, we could lock things down. It was a very secure network. We had web filtering and all of that. We had like safe ways of working. And I think when you're physically in the office, I think folks are more mindful of what they need to be doing. And I think as we shifted to working from home, I think for lots of it, it wasn't the very controlled, safe, contained shift that we would have wanted. I think in some cases, folks woke up and found that they were in lockdown and they couldn't go to the office, they couldn't leave the house, and they had to work from home. So just being mindful of things like, using the use of encryption. So making sure that devices are encryption. So, if the network isn't particularly secure or stable, having a response for phishing emails, because phishing emails still haven't gone away. And whereas before you might have encouraged people to just like walk them up to the service desk, now it's a case of, right, we have to actually have a documented formal response. So before they do anything, they maybe click the report button. Outlook or most email clients will have a report button, report phishing, report spam. So reporting that button, having the knowledge to not having IT security knowledge out there. So, empowering people and letting them know kind of what a suspicious link could look like, what a suspicious email could look like, and having a plan for when people click links, because people will always click links. It doesn't matter what kind of safeguards you have in place. You will always have people that will click the links. And my favorite is when they've gone to delete the email or forward it or report it, and they've accidentally clicked the link as well. So having a plan for that, whether that's isolating the machine immediately, running an antivirus scan, notifying IT, just having some structure and some plans around that. Basically, just try and think of all the things that could potentially go wrong and try and plan for them. And most importantly, document those responses in a way that end users can understand. So having maybe a knowledge article. So what to do if you've clicked on a link, because it's easily done and we're not going to go after you for doing something by accident. But these are the steps that you need to take to secure your information and the company information. And just making those steps easy and clear and having lots of diagrams so they know what to expect.
Okay. Thank you so much for answering those questions, Vawns. So with that, I think we'll close the session. We will be sending you all a recording of the session in a couple of days, so look out for that. And once again, thank you all so much for joining in. Hope you enjoyed the session and you had great takeaways. Thank you once again for taking the time and effort to being here and for giving us such an amazing presentation. Truly appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks so much. Take care, everyone, and have a great rest of the day.
Take care. See you all. Bye.
Bye.